Uh, Next, we are moving on to instruction course 7, and I welcome Dr. Sharath for the session, and I request him to take over the session. Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Santosh Fanawar and the Telangana Ophthalmic Society Executive Committee for giving us this opportunity to unfold the mystery behind the surprises or whatever, and how to go ahead with the complicated patients and how to do different type of surgeries for these patients. So in this, in this instruction course, we are going to deal with the basics of the IOLs, the advanced technology IOLs, and then how do we implant them by manually and then also by automated methods, and how the results and how to calculate the implantation techniques, the IOL powers, and accordingly the multifocals and different type of multifocals. And here we have Dr. K. Madhukar Reddy. He's the past president of Telangana Ophthalmic Society, and he will be dealing with the basics of premium IOLs. He's a cornea surgeon, being practicing from the past 33 years as a Drishti Eye Hospital, a popular eye surgeon. And he made a pave to all the surgeons who are working in institutes to come out and then establish a private practice. And welcome, Dr. Madhukar Reddy. And then, yeah, let us enlighten us about the basics of the different IOLs. Yeah.
Yeah, Venkat is also here. Hi. Okay, let me share my screen. So all of us in private practice, cataracts are our bread, butter, and everything of our day-to-day life. So all of us should know everything about cataract surgery. Of course, not you, Venkat. And so I'll be dealing about the basics of premium IOLs, that is torics and multifocals. Regular IOLs, till now, all of us were concentrating on somehow removing the cataract efficiently and putting a intraocular lens in its place. But as we add value and as society advances and demands more from ophthalmology, we'll have to give them better vision, both for distance and near. People would like to have intraocular surgery without wearing glasses later on. So basically a toric IOL will give them a distance vision, and for reading they'll have to wear glasses, and the multifocal lenses goes further in giving them both distance and near vision. That's the goal of our cataract surgery. So I'll talk about toric IOLs first in the first few minutes, and then about multifocal IOLs, the basics about it. So we should all know that astigmatism, that is the corneal shape, changes in about 30 to 40% of people. As you see in this chart, so about a significant number, if you take astigmatism more than 1.5, then that will be about 25 to 30% of people will have astigmatism. So even if significant astigmatism, so even if you correct the spherical part of it, still they will be having a problem of not seeing appropriately because of the astigmatism. And if you include 1 and above, then it will again come to about 40%, more than 40, 50%. But at least those who have 1.5 and more astigmatism should be dealt with. So for that, the preferred management for pre-existing astigmatism among ophthalmologists, this is by the ASCRS study a few years back, toric IOL was the best in terms of doctors using this technology to control the astigmatism. Then came limbal relaxing incisions, and then other post-operative refractive procedures and above. So right now, because of advancement and easy availability of this technology, significantly more number of people are using toric IOLs to correct astigmatism after cataract surgery. So as you know, this is Alcon company was one of the first to get into this field, and this is a typical Alcon toric IOL, wherein the anterior surface does not have power, but the power is in the posterior segment, as you see in the slide below. So it covers both the spherical aspect and the cylindrical aspect of the corneal optic disability. Basically, here we can correct regular astigmatism. So you should be aware of what astigmatism the patient has, either by keratometry or topography. When you mean regular astigmatism, the cornea has to be curved in one axis only and not irregularly or in a irregular way or in an oblique way. So that the lens cannot correct, because the lens is designed to correct astigmatism in one axis only. And typically 1 to 1.5, each physician has their own level of cutoff. So, but 1.5 would be ideal, or up to 1 also if you're confident, and if the patient wants it, you can go up to 1 diopter. So these toric IOLs, now various companies are manufacturing it. A lot of Indian companies are manufacturing it. This is a typical Alcon range of lenses at the corneal plane. That is what we give the glass power. So that plane is normally corrected. So 1 to 4 is available. So up to 4 cylindrical power we can correct. So to explain to the patients, there are many various aids are there, visual aids, to explain to the patient what is astigmatism and how it will correct. So this is from one of the Alcon series. So because basically we have to create a demand for this premium IOLs, we'll have to offer this, saying that you have to convince the patient that you have something called astigmatism that also need to be corrected, because what the patient says, you have put a lens and why do you have to wear a glass? That's a typical question. You have corrected everything, but we have to tell them that there's something called toricity, there's something called multifocality, and something like a basic IOL, and then try to value add your package to the patient. Then after once the patient has been convinced and you're ready to do a toric IOL, you have to know how much power of the IOL to put, what power to order from the company. So for all these, you need data, and then we need precise data, because you're trying to give a precise result. So we need pre-operative keratometric data, either by a keratometer or an automated keratometer or a topographer, axial length. And earlier ultrasonic methods are not very correct, or little, because there you are putting pressure on the cornea, and that will give us erroneous axial length. So the non-contact biometers like the LensStar or IOL Master are good for this, and ideally it's better to use them. Also, while doing the surgery, you yourself by your incision induce some surgically induced astigmatism. So you should know yours, otherwise there are gross data which you know for so much incision, so much power has to be added as surgical astigmatism. And then most of the companies have toric calculators on the web, and you have to feed these results, and that will give you what is the axis where you have to implant this lens, and what power of the lens, or what how much power of the lens, the astigmatic power, you'll have to decide. So these are available. The company person also will be able to guide you with this in the initial stages. Later on, you can do it yourself. You should remember how to mark your axis, or how to know your axis. So this is a typical way. There's a 0 to 180 in the vertical meridian. So you have to mark them pre-operatively and also during surgery as to what is the axis of the IOL which you are placing. So all these have to be precisely done and with patience. So use either, if you are using ultrasound, it's important to use immersion biometry, because that will give you the best results. Or if you have LensStar or IOL Master, that's the best. And in case if there's any difference between two readings or difference between both eyes, you will have to recalculate and add your own surgically induced astigmatism, which you can calculate by feeding your data, your old IOL power data and the results into the Warren Hills SIA calculator, or your company person will be glad to help you to grossly identify which are 0.5 diopters for 2.5 millimeters or smaller, and 0.7 for a larger incisions. So some of the tips is that your measurements have to be precise. A single person doing the measurements will be good rather than a lot of people doing it, because that will induce variation in your surgical results. And also patients should discontinue contact lens wear at least 2 to 3 weeks prior, and dry eyes have to be managed properly. And a patient initially start off with less astigmatism, then you can go for higher astigmatism. Corneal topography is good to do beforehand. And patients who have, even though there's a corneal astigmatism, if they are not showing in the spectacle part, means they have lenticular astigmatism. So those candidates also have to be treated. And some people with extremely small pupils, potential bag instability, so and those conditions have to be first contraindicated. So your confidence in your technology is important so that you can impart it to the patient and he will be convinced with your suggestions. And then potential outcomes, you should know that what are the limitations. You have to counsel the patients properly and then see that there are no other pathologies also. So to summarize, treat by the keratometric cylinder. What's in the corneal axis you have to treat. Know your surgically induced astigmatism. Beware of the wrong axis. So proper markings should be there, and how they are marked you should know, and take care of pre-markings. And in case something goes wrong, you can always enhance with laser correction by doing a surface ablation to correct the patient if he's unhappy. So coming to multifocal lenses, this was initially started by John Pierce in 1986, where they initially created a bifocal lens with a central near zone and a peripheral distant zone. So again, through the last 30 years, various lenses have come and gone. The Storz lens 3M company, which has been bought by Alcon, and then Abbott, AMO, Pharmacia. There are many such modifications which have gone through, and it's still an evolving technology. So the diffractive technology is commonly used technology now, and the EDOF technology. Right now, Alcon PanOptix trifocals are one of the popular ones, but they're coming up with newer lenses in the near future. Tomorrow is the launch. And these are refractive lenses, which have some disadvantages, which all of us have discarded. Now we are using more of diffractive IOLs, which are pupil independent. The refractive surface is the anterior surface, and posterior lens surface have multiple rings, which will create multiple foci, so that you'll have proper vision at different distances. And these are both good for near and distance. These are the various models which are available in the market. There are some different technologies which are being tried, like this lens, where the upper segment is for the distance and the lower segment is for the near vision, but all of them are still in the lab, not in the market now. Then once a patient has astigmatism, you have to think of a toric multifocal lens, which you are combining both the multifocal and the toric components. There are supplementary multifocal lenses wherein they have only the multifocality, which you can add on in front of the existing IOL. The keys for success here is good patient selection. So then you have to counsel the patient properly what they're getting into and not promise them completely glass-free vision. Accurate biometry is important, good power calculation, and your good surgical technique. So for patient selection, the important thing is they should have a desire not to wear glasses for near. Otherwise, they'll say, I can wear a glass. Why do you want to give me such an expensive lens? So those patients are not convinced of this. So the age, of course, and then functional and occupational requirements of the person, if they are sports persons or they have specific requirements for certain occupations, then they should be considered. Those who have ocular pathology should not be considered for this because they won't have appropriate results. So patients who are hypercritical should be excluded, occupational night drivers as of now, and patients with pre-existing ocular pathology or previous refractive surgery can be excluded depending on this one. If there's any surgical complication, try to avoid implantation of a multifocal lens. Biometry, optical biometry is the best. And you have to calibrate your instruments regularly because that errors will creep into your final results. Compare both measurements, use modern formulas, and customize your A constants and surgeon factors. Be aware of them. Astigmatism we've discussed already. Counseling consideration, document in the clinical charts what you tell the patients, because even if you get 0.5 or 1 diopter remaining power, they will say that the surgery has failed, and you promise them not, you tell them that they will be less dependent on glasses, not that they'll be glass free. So that you'll have to tell them. And also the higher packages which you're having for these multifocal lenses will have higher expectations. So please tell them that even if it's a Mercedes car or a Maruti car, accidents can happen. Not that if you have a high range car accidents won't happen. Something like that, some examples to help them. Thank you very much for your attention. And thank you, Sharath, for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Madhukar. You need to wait for a while for the discussion. Discussion is in the last. Now, may I introduce Dr. Praveen Vadavalli Krishna from L. Prasad Institute. He's heading the cornea services, and his special interest is into cornea diseases, corneal refractive surgery, and also cataract, refractive cataract surgery. And he has published, he has got peer-reviewed publications more than 70, and then 300 publications all. And he travels a lot, and then I still wonder how he manages his both the practicing in the institute and also elsewhere. So here I introduce Dr. Praveen Krishna. He'll be talking about the toric IOL implantation in difficult situations. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharath Babu Garu, and also the pleasure to be on your course, and thank you for inviting me to speak. So I'm going to be speaking on two separate topics actually, and the second topic is something that Dr. Rishi Swarup was supposed to cover, and that was about toric IOLs and unusual situations. But first, I'll talk about implantation of toric IOL, the basics that are important to consider from the point of view of implanting toric IOL. And this perspective, great. So I have very few videos, so hopefully that should work. So I'm going to be speaking mainly about what are the additional things that you should do when you implant a toric IOL. And from this perspective, I'm going to be speaking mainly about marking the cornea in the traditional way before you actually do surgery. So this is toric IOLs. Implantation is nothing very different from the regular IOLs, and all of you are excellent cataract surgeons. But I think the pre-op planning and the pre-op marking is a very important part of getting this right. So why is marking on the cornea important? Marking, all of you know, is important because when the patient lies down, there is obviously some cyclotorsion. And because of this, we always want to mark the patient when the patient is sitting up. Axis marks are also sometimes inaccurate. So sometimes whatever marks you make when the patient is lying down may not be on the correct axis. And the results of toric IOL can be variable. A 15-degree rotation reduces the efficacy, as all of you know. And also, when you want to mark a patient, sometimes it might be difficult to mark exactly where the center of the cornea is when your pupil is dilated as well. So the typical method of marking that a lot of us use is just to mark the patient at the slit lamp before we take them in for surgery. And this is a simple way in which you can just mark the 3 major meridians of the cornea with a pen. But it is not as simple as this. And that is why there are several devices that have been manufactured to help mark the cornea. One is this. This is a Cioni marker. Again, what you can do is you can mark, you can use a gentian violet pen along the 3 primary axes and then put this on the patient's cornea. Or you can use a marker that has a level, as you can see here. This is a Neutz Solomon marker. And both of these are actually quite useful, either the plain marker that you see on the left side or the marker with a level, also called the pendulum marker. And both of these tend to give quite accurate results, though the pendulum marker actually is better because what it does is, because of the air bubble that is present here, it prevents you from tilting and also avoids any parallax errors when you're marking the eye. Now, in addition to this, when you're trying to mark the cornea, sometimes some of us use the slit lamp while marking it. Sometimes it's very difficult to navigate because it is difficult to put your instruments, hold the patient's eye through all the knobs and dials of the slit lamp. So it tends to become a little difficult as well. So an easy method to actually mark the cornea, and this is something that I like to use, is just use the primary beams of the slit lamp at 90 and 180 degrees and mark on the patient's cornea. Let's see a short video about how to do that. So here you see that this is the patient. This is the, on a paper, I'm trying to move the slit vertically and then horizontally. This is the 180 and the 90 degree meridian. So you block the other patient's eye, ask the patient to fixate with the eye that you're operating, have the slit projected onto the patient's eye in the horizontal meridian. And when the slit is overlapping on the cornea, all you have to do is take a needle. I don't like using a pen because the mark tends to get smudged. Sometimes the mark tends to get washed away with time. So just use a needle and ask the patient to look straight ahead and go and make a small mark on the epithelium of the cornea at the edge, at the limbus, along the two marks of the 180-degree meridian. This is more than enough for you to have this mark available, because this will last through the entire surgery, through the entire day. And once the epithelium heals the next day, you will not see any sign of it. So, which is a better technique? There are many comparative studies between these three techniques of marking the slit lamp, or just use the slit beam that I just showed you, or using the pendulum marker. And if you look at the rotational deviation between 5.8 degrees to 3.7 degrees to 6 degrees, the amount of deviation is very small. So it really does not make much difference which method you actually use. So you can use any of these methods, whichever is comfortable. So after you mark, then how do you further mark the axis at which you place the toric IOL? So what you need is something called a degree gauge. I kept speaking, so I don't know where slides got lost.
It's only 5 seconds, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So then I'll just go back to my slides, and then I was just talking about the different techniques of marking, and then saying that whichever technique you use, all three techniques actually seem to be working quite well. Very low mean error of between 3 and 6 degrees. And so all three techniques are quite okay. And I was also saying that intraoperatively, the other instrument that you require is the degree gauge. You can use a flat degree gauge, as you can see here on the left side, called the Mendes degree gauge, or you can use a curved one called the Henderson. I much prefer the Henderson one because it has a matte finish surface, and it also is curved, so it reduces reflections from the microscope and is easier to see. In addition to the degree gauge, you also need something called an axis marker. Again, there's several different types. You can choose whichever type works best for you, and whichever one you like. I like the Henderson one, and that is what I usually use for most of my cases. So how do you mark? This is just an example of marking for implantation of an LIA actually, but this is exactly what I would do with the degree gauge and with a Henderson marker on the cornea. Now, let's look at the other important step in toric marking that you tend to do. And so if you can look at this video, and this is marking that I've already done at the slit lamp, and you can see that there are marks that are made in the 90-degree meridian, and then I'm using the degree gauge to align the marks at 180 and 90 degrees. And here what I do is I just take MBR knife and just mark on the epithelium at the degree at which I'm going to implant. So this is a 7-degree implantation of my lens. And once I mark on the epithelium, then you see the marks, but actually you turn on the retroillumination of your microscope. And if you dry those area of the marks, you'll see those marks very clearly. As you can see here, up and down, the marks are seen very clearly when you dry the cornea, as you can see there. And they will last you throughout the surgery. So this is a very durable method of marking. In addition, Dr. Sharath Babu is going to speak to you about the toric alignment systems. I think specifically he's going to be talking to you about the Verion alignment system. But I want to share with you another alignment system that we've been using called the Callisto. This is and this again is a very useful alignment system to not only help align the toric IOL, but also help to plan your incisions. So this alignment system also helps you to make your capsulorhexis. See, this is the capsulorhexis mark. You can set it to whatever diameter you want, and you can do your capsulorhexis within that. And actually, it's a very good guide to make sure that you get the right size capsulorhexis, especially if you're not a very experienced surgeon. Helps you in guiding where the appropriate site of the incision is. And once you make your incision and complete your cataract surgery, as you implant your toric lens, this is a toric lens implantation. This is, I think, J&J toric lens, and you'll see that we are trying to align the toric lens along with the marker, and you see that it's slightly misaligned because of parallax. And I'll go back and try to align the lens again. You see here, I'm trying to go back and push the lens slightly to the left side to make sure that I've got perfect alignment at the end of surgery. So you can use either of these, or you can just use a manual marking. Any of these will work very well. But remember that before surgery, marking of the cornea is very, very important to make sure that you actually have alignment. The same marker for making LIs, but I'll skip that. About implantation of the toric lens, again, just one or two small tips that I'd like to share. So when you're planning to implant a toric lens, again, this is in a post-keratoplasty eye. Here you see I'm trying to make the marks using a blade, and then I just mark on the epithelium, and you'll see that these marks tend to stay right till the end of surgery. So this is the initial incision. This is a post-keratoplasty eye with a cataract, and you see that I'm making incision that is quite wide. And then I have to make a short corneal tunnel because I don't want to go through the graft-hose junction. And once I finish my cataract surgery, in this case, this is a very challenging kind of case because of the limited amount of graft-hose junction that you have. And then I'm implanting toric IOL. This is an Alcon toric IOL. Again, no financial interest. But after you implant, very important that as you remove your viscoelastic, you keep rotating the lens in your left hand using another instrument so that your final alignment is always with no viscoelastic inside the eye. And you remove all the viscoelastic from behind the lens as well so that there is no rotation. Here you go. I'm lifting the lens and removing all the viscoelastic, so there is no rotation after you remove all the viscoelastic. Then you check your incisions, and that's the end of surgery. This is the same patient. He's 20/20 parts with a residual cylinder, but that is what is expected in a post-keratoplasty case, and the patient is really happy. Last point that I want to share with you is if you have a small pupil, or if you feel that the pupil diameter might come down during surgery, it is very important to ensure that you put in an instrument that will help your pupil stay dilated throughout the surgery. In this case, I'm actually using a Bhattacharjee pupil ring, the hexagonal ring that you'll see that I'm implanting inside the eye. So this ring is important because not only does it allow you to do a good cataract surgery, but at the end of surgery, sometimes when your pupil becomes very small, you will be still able to see the toric IOL marks in this scenario. You can see the toric IOL marks when the pupil is dilated, and this is really helpful. So to summarize what I just spoke to you about, the marking at the slit line is very, very important for you to get good alignment. You can use a markerless suite, but they are usually more expensive, and you can get very highly accurate alignment with any of these systems. You have several available in the market right now, also very useful for repeat surgery, and you can increase the number of toric IOLs you do in your practice. But it has limited volume for surgeons with low volume because the expense is quite high. But if you're doing a low volume surgery, diligent marking of the slit lamp and alignment during surgery will work equally well. So
Yeah, thank
you.
So,
Sharath Babu Garu, should I talk as well, or should we have any?
No, you can continue because Dr. Rishi is not there, Dr. Praveen. You can show some of your videos, and then in different difficult situations, even you can show us some in keratoconus or something, whatever you have.
Yeah.
You have another 12 minutes to actually, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak again, but I hope to share with you something slightly different. I'm going to try and talk to you about toric IOLs and high astigmatism, and several different scenarios here where we've used toric IOLs in high astigmatism. Hopefully this will be useful. So what I'm trying to do here is going to look at the potential of doing toric IOLs in several different scenarios: keratoconus, PMCD, post-refractive surgery, either in RK or post-LASIK ectasia, and in post-keratoplasty eyes. So as Dr. Madhukar Reddy showed you about the options available for typical toric IOLs, the Alcon and J&J lenses that are available can correct a maximum of about 4 diopters of astigmatism on the corneal plane. You can have customized J&J lenses that will allow you to correct up to 8 diopters, but these lenses are made only to order, and they can correct up to 5.6 diopters on the corneal plane, and they are extremely expensive. They're not available frequently in the market. So in addition to that, Rayner has lenses that you can correct up to about 7.5 diopters of astigmatism, whereas the Ultima Toric, the lenses from Care Group, though it's a hydrophilic lens, has powers from plus 0.5 to plus 40, and you can correct up to 20 diopters. 21 diopters is the highest that I've corrected of astigmatism in these cases as well. So if you're doing a patient who has keratoconus, what is important to remember is you need to have somebody with high regular astigmatism. Irregular astigmatism will not work. Potentially somebody who's intolerant to contact lenses, generally older patients, because older patients tend to have more stable topography, or those who are post-collagen cross-linking. And if you have a cataract in these patients, either steroid-induced, which is most common, or other reasons, you can actually do this surgery. Here is an example of a 26-year-old male of keratoconus who, following collagen cross-linking, uncorrected vision is 2200, best corrected 2040, has an anterior subcapsular cataract, and his topography is stable for 1 year. Here is his A scan, and you will see that there is relatively regular astigmatism, about 4.5 diopters, and we elected to do toric Alcon IOL SN16WF toric, and then his unaided visual acuity post-operatively is 20/20 parts. Over 5-year period, he has a stable topography and is extremely happy with his outcome. So this is one area that you can use a toric lens, and this is his topography scan showing that it's extremely stable with no change in the topography as well. One of the problems with keratoconus is the fact that you might not get very, very accurate alignment of our lens along with the axis in the cornea, because measuring the astigmatism in these patients is going to be a little difficult. So in keratoconus especially, one of the problems is which axis do you use? What do you have on biometry or on topography? We tend to use the biometry axis because it is more central, but we always cross-check with the topography axis. In keratoconus patients who have decentered apex, it becomes more challenging. You need to ensure that you have a stable topography. IOL formulas, we use typically the SRK2, and that seems to be the most accurate formula in keratoconus patients. You also need to think about whether you want to use an aspheric or a spherical IOL. Preferably, you would like a spherical IOL, but these are not available in toric IOLs. The second scenario where you can put a toric IOL is in PMCD. Again, these are in cases where you have a high regular astigmatism, where you can not do corneal intervention. And typically in older individuals, either if they have a steroid-induced cataract or even if they have a clear cornea, it will be very useful to do this kind of surgery. Here is an example of a patient who has PMCD, very high astigmatism against the rule, and has a cataract. And this patient, you will see, has about 7.5 diopters of astigmatism on topography as well as on biometry. And we did a toric IOL for this patient to correct this astigmatism at about 110 degrees. And after surgery, as you can see, the pre-op visual acuity in the right eye was 20/80, best corrected. He improved to 20/30, uncorrected in the right eye. Left eye was amblyopic. He was 20/500, 2600. Then he corrected to 20/50 in the left eye after surgery as well. So he was extremely happy. This is one scenario that you can do toric IOLs for as well. So another area that you can do toric IOLs is post-refractive surgery, like in post-LASIK ectasia, post-RK. Remember always to use a scleral incision and also to try and use an aspheric lens in these cases, because you will have already a very flat cornea in these cases. So post-keratoplasty is another scenario. And as you can see here, here is a patient who has undergone a DALC in the left eye. He then underwent a toric lens in 2014 and now has an uncorrected visual acuity of 20/30. With correction, he's 20/20. And again, these are patients with quite high astigmatism. You see almost 9 diopters who do very well with this kind of lens. What is important in these kind of cases is the fact that the internal astigmatism, which is because of the back of the cornea, will actually be very high and will sometimes try to balance the external corneal astigmatism. So you should be careful about what the topographic astigmatism is and what the refractive astigmatism is, because sometimes the refractive astigmatism might be quite low. Here is the same patient, and as you can see, the corneal astigmatism, as you can see it here, is about 8.8 diopters. The lens that we put inside is about 8 diopters of astigmatism, and he has a residual of only 0.89, and so an exceptionally good result, and the patient is really happy with his outcome after surgery as well. So this is post keratoplasty. Important to look at the specular counts before you do toric IOLs for these patients, so that you don't cause rejection or failure in these patients as well. So another scenario that you can use these lenses is an extremely high astigmatism. Here you see a patient with 11 diopters of astigmatism, and this patient obviously with spectacles is improving only to 20/50. So because of the PSC, we did an Ultima Smart Toric lens with 17 diopters of astigmatism implanted in the patient's eye. Here you can see about 13 diopters of astigmatism there. And after implanting the lens, we found that the patient actually had an increase in the astigmatism to almost 17.75 diopters. So when we went and looked at the refraction, 16.5, 20, 30, we realized that the lens was actually flipped in the eye. So we did an IOL exchange, reversed the lens and put it back. And we found that the same patient had a very good outcome of 20/30 with a very low residual cylinder in the eye. So you can use very high astigmatism correction IOLs for patients who have high astigmatism post all these surgeries, and the outcome in these patients is very good. So here is a short case series of about 21 eyes in which we have done these surgeries. You've seen that about 5 cases of penetrating keratoplasty, 6 eyes with PMCD, 3 of keratoconus, couple dull, few corneal scar, 2 nanophthalmos, 1 after a patch graft. All of these patients have undergone a custom toric IOL implant. These patients had an average cylinder of about 9 diopters, and we've been able to correct them very well, and they have had very good visual outcomes, both uncorrected as well as best corrected. You see there's a significant improvement in the visual acuity after surgery as well. So just to summarize, using these toric IOLs and custom lenses for keratoconus, PMCD, and post-keratoplasty astigmatism, you see that they can actually be used in these case scenarios, and they usually will have very good outcomes and will be able to correct very high astigmatism as well. The commercially available torics are good for low astigmatism, and custom torics are useful for high astigmatism. You have an improvement in the uncorrected as well as the best corrected visual acuity. So thank you very much again. I hope we can have a discussion about this too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Praveen. And then now I'll complete the session with the Varian assisted toric IOL implantation. And yeah. So this is the Varian guided toric IOL implantation. Now, why a Varian guided toric implantation is the question, because all these years we've been operating by marking manually by different techniques, as Dr. Praveen clearly told us. But when you go and then see the post-operative the results, you know that 10 degrees of misalignment will reduce the astigmatic correction by approximately 30%. And when you see the number of patients coming in, when you see it is like more than 1 diopter in my clinical practice, I see around 60 to 70% of them has got preoperative astigmatism. So what to do with that now? So if you need to give a good correction, we need to have a good equipment and then good surgery and then good best results. So for that, we need to have a good machine too. So this is how it looks like the post-operatively if the patient has got a cylinder, left cylinder. This is how the vision looks like. So now what are the different error sources you see whenever you are marking manually? It is like the first is the biometry error. So you need to have a very good biometer, and I use the IOL Master 700 with the Barrett TK and then the Barrett formula. And then also the transcription error. Whenever the you note down this and then you enter it differently. If it is you are using a manual A scan, sometimes it happens you change that up and down, or when you enter into the software, you might say up and down the steep axis, and then you see again a problem in the post-operative results. Then the astigmatism planning error. This is what I am telling now. The manual marking error. So this can happen whenever the patient is sitting right straight there, and then you started marking. The patient usually, sometimes they tilt their head. Even I observed that my head is always tilted to one side. So when you need to keep it straight, even though I don't have a spondylitis, still it's my habit. So whenever you do that, you need to do that sitting the patient straight, which is not that very easy, because the doctor sits quite opposite to the patient and then measures them. And then the cyclo-rotation error. This is what, again, whenever there is a tilt in the head, there is again a cyclo-rotation error, which we miss it. And then the surgeon-induced astigmatism. This, again, you need to have a study of at least 50 to 100 cases, wherein you get your surgical-induced astigmatism. And then accordingly, you can plan your surgery. So this can be, once you come to a conclusion about your surgical induced astigmatism, this can be incorporated into your formula and then get the exact IOL which is needed for the patient. And then the capsulorhexis construction. Yes, if you have a catalyst or a lensex, you can do the exact capsulorhexis, but there are other different means where you can mark on the cornea and then do that. And this is a machine which can help you with the marker, and then accordingly you can do a capsulorhexis. And then IOL positioning error. So this depends again, like if it is centered or not, this can be calculated. It is a pupil centered or not. Of course, there is a lot of debate again in that. Once it is centered and the pupil and the bag constricts, there might be some change in that. But then on the table, you can at least make sure that it is been centered during surgery. And this is the astigmatism I've been talking. 60 to 70% of my patients has got astigmatism, and whatever IOL you put, most of them are not that happy to wear glasses for distance. And so we bought this machine quite some time back. Even I don't have any financial interest with this machine. And how do you do that? So whenever you make a patient, it has got two units. One is in the OPD diagnostic unit, the other one is in the operation theater. Now, whenever you make the patient to sit on the machine, make sure that whenever the patient is sit, shift the machine to one eye and then directly again shift to the other eye. Without any change in your lifting the machine up and down, that means the head is put straight on the machine. So then only you have to take the record. That's how you get you can avoid the head tilt. But here again, some patients are with the spondylitis, they're always, their head is tilt to one side. So this you have to take into consideration, because accordingly you have to put an IOL so that to get the best result for these patients. And then the IOL formula, again, your biometry, you need to have the best biometry, and the popular one is right now is the Barrett TK formula, and through which you can get the best results. And the preoperative astigmatism, the regular astigmatism, you have to calculate and then see, and then accordingly operate. And this is the machine I was talking about, the which is in the OPD, the diagnostic unit, which has got 12 white LEDs, which will have the reflection onto the cornea. And then it records, like the central 2.8 millimeter of the cornea, it records the corneal curvature. And then this is how it measures. Like, it depends upon, this is what I've been telling. If there is a tilt in the cornea, again, you have that, but that you have to take care by making sure that the patient head is correctly placed onto the machine. And then this digital marker, which is like after taking the photograph of the patient, the patient's eye in the diagnostic unit, this is being transferred to the operation theater, and there is a digital marker. This is the OPD machine. So digital marker, which is you can see the image onto the cornea, where you can have the different measurements, and then accordingly you can plan your surgery. So what are the things you get here is the keratometry, the size of the pupil. So before surgery, you take the pupil size also. So accordingly, you can type of IOL you want to implant on the particular patient. So you need to take these measurements before dilatation of the pupil. So before dilatation, once you take the pupil, that is without putting any drops onto the eye, you need to take these measurements. Only then you get the correct keratometry readings. So if you mess up, like after dilatation, you get wrong readings because its values keep changing. If it happens like that, again, you need to bring the patient again and then do the readings again. And then it takes the white measurement also, and then takes the center of the pupil also, it calculates. So accordingly, you can place your IOL. It has got two options. Either it says center of the pupil or this visual axis. So one of them you can select and accordingly implant the IOL. And it has got a different advanced formula, the Barrett TK and the Barrett formulas, wherein it can give you the exact IOL needed. And then the beauty of this is it calculates this surgeon-induced astigmatism, and also it gives the post-operative expected refraction of the patient also, so that you can decide which IOL to put for the particular patient. See, when there is a astigmatism up to -1 or 1 diopter of astigmatism, this you can again see in this calculation. You can see in the under the printout, you can see what is the exact desired refraction of this patient post-operatively. So accordingly, you can change your IOL power and then select the IOL for this patient. And this is what I'm talking, the spherical 0.36 and the cylinder 0.85. So this is the best IOL. This is how you select the patient. And if it is more than 1.25 or 1.5, then you need to go for implantation of the toric multifocals. And this is what, again, everything is there in this machine. And this is how it is being transferred into the OT. And this is how it looks like. So first it tells you where exactly you have to give the incision. This is how it is like. And then it gives you the size, the implantation site also. And then again, it gives you the size of the capsular axis, what you intended to do. That's a virtual image onto the cornea. And then accordingly, you can plan your capsular axis. And this is the toric alignment of the IOL, through which the darker one, through which you have to implant the IOL. And this is the centration. You can again decide whether you want to put it in the pupillary axis or in the center of the pupil. And this is how the implantation axis is finally, it is like, yeah. So I'd like to show you one small video, how it is done. So first you need to register the patient's eye onto the machine. So already the photograph is being taken and the scleral vessels are being recognized by the machine, and then it says like the registration is done. So once it is done, the incision is given at the place where it is being intended to. So this incision site is again finalized, taking into the SIA, and then taking into the, you can even rotate it and then see where exactly you get the least astigmatism. And this machine again, it can be given, it can be organized along with the Lensex, and then you can also give incisions on the cornea to reduce the astigmatism up to -1 diopter. And this is one more patient where we have been implanting the registration and then do surgery, the incision site, the capsular axis, and this is the machine which is good for a high volume surgeon, as Dr. Praveen has been telling. But then again, if there is somebody with a low volume, they can also use this machine with a friend, because you get a much better results with this machine. And so this is how you implant. This is the darker side, and this is the toric IOL. And this is the catalyst patient, where the same thing, but here the capsular rhexis is already been done. The cataract is emulsified. It's an IOL. It's a PanOptix IOL, toric. And then rotate it onto the axis, clear the visco from behind the IOL. See that it is being implanted in the axis, and fill it with the BSS. And that's it. So I recommend to have either this or Callisto or something like having a good machine where it can assist you in the giving a best result for the patients, especially the toric patients, and they having the high astigmatism, giving the best results for these patients. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity and for patient hearing. So now the floor is open for questions. So any questions? Probably, yeah. Madhukar, you can initiate some questions, or Praveen he himself can initiate. And
Yeah, I think basically, I mean, a person who has been doing for a long time, fine. I mean, he's got into toric lenses, but a person who's initially is not using toric lenses, they will have a initial anxiety. But I think the company person will be able to guide him with the selection of the lens, calculation of the power, and supply of the power, and how to do it. But or else they can come and see some of us who are already doing it, or nowadays there are so many courses like this where they can attend. But once you get into it, it's a simple extension of your cataract surgery, and patient satisfaction is also high. And you should be able to convince your patient to pay a little more for these lenses. And nowadays, good Indian IOLs are also available. Price is also not an issue. So you can start off with either the Indian ones initially, if you're cost conscious or if the patient is cost conscious, but get into this, and sooner or later, I think this will be the norm. So all of us should be able to correct the astigmatism which a patient has. And then eventually you should get into more multifocals also.
so seeing your using so many of these toric IOLs, so what is your experience with these hydrophilic torics, and then how are they stable? I mean, the rotational stability of these IOLs. Do you have any experience on that, Dr. Madhukar?
No, I strictly am a person who uses only hydrophobic lenses. I don't like hydrophilic lenses because of PCO rates later on. And
Madhukar, you need to unmute yourself. It got.
I'm sorry, yeah. So I feel that hydrophilic lenses, especially in toric lenses, are no-no. And there are good quality hydrophobic lenses in the Indian market, as well as lenses which are from overseas. So you have to go for a hydrophobic lens, in my opinion, especially for toric lenses, because we need toric stability of the lens.
So what in your experience, like this overseas hydrophobic IOLs, what is the rotational stability, and when do you expect this rotation to happen, like after implantation? What time you need to check for it?
I usually, for many years, I've used only Alcon torics, but in the last couple of years, I've started to use Biotech toric lenses, and which give equally good results. And but of course, if the patient can pay, you can always have two packages, and you can go for the Alcon if necessary. And but the important thing about rotational stability is that you'll have to. Praveen has clearly shown us how to mark our corneas pre-operative marking, and during surgery, how to mark the lens position. We have to follow all those strictly. And the important thing is make the IOLs rotate about 5 to 10 degrees, place them 10 degrees before the marking, and then clockwise you rotate it slowly so that you don't overshoot. If you overshoot again, you'll have to go all around and then get the lenses back into position. That's one thing. And as Praveen already has emphasized, that we don't leave any viscoelastic, but I normally implant most of my lenses under hydroimplantation, so I don't use a visco at all practically for that, which is good. And but if you're using visco, make sure that you clean the visco above and below the lens, and make sure the lens is in place. But eventually, I think 5 degrees that way, this way will occur in your markings or in your lens slippage. But in case on the first post-operative day also, make sure either you dilate and make sure that the lens is in position, because if you have to rotate the lens again as a secondary on the next day, it's better to do it early, because once the capsules fuse, the anterior and the posterior capsule, it's difficult to rotate. So make sure that they're in position. Initially, if you are hesitant, you can dilate the pupils and see whether the markings are in the correct position approximately. Otherwise, 5 weeks later, when you're looking for the visual correction, then you'll know that your lens is way off the axis when you find a refractive surprise.
Dr. Praveen, your experience of this hydrophilic torics, rotational stability comparative to hydrophobic IOLs?
These actually are plate haptic lenses, and in general, I think plate haptic lenses tend to have little less stability than your typical lenses that have your J or C-shaped haptics. And I found that there is a little bit of variability. You're right with these lenses, but these lenses we tend to use in corneas that have very high astigmatism. So even if they rotate with time to a slight extent, and the patient develops a little bit of astigmatism, they still are pretty tolerating with this kind of residual astigmatism. So I still think it's a good option, because that is the only way in which you can correct that degree of astigmatism. You don't have any other method.
Okay. Do you have any experience of implanting multifocals in keratoconus patients, multifocal torics?
Now, if there is one thing that you should never do, you should never implant a multifocal lens in a keratoconus patient. Last week, in fact, I removed one multifocal lens in a keratoconus patient and implanted a toric hydrophilic lens. The patient, I don't know, he was so happy because he thought that he'd lost his vision. That is the kind of vision that he had. I think, like you rightly said, very bad idea to implant a multifocal lens in a patient who has keratoconus.
So anything else you have in your mind to discuss? We have another 30 seconds.
30 seconds, nothing really. I think that's a wonderful session, and I think really good learning points. And I think what both Dr. Madhukar Reddy and you shared, I think very, very fundamental, important tips for surgeons who are starting their practice, and also to improve outcomes of toric IOLs. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Praveen, enjoyed your talk as usual.
Praveen?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you all the doctors for the wonderful session and the discussion. We shall move on to the